Saying all of those. Grayson family, thank you to them for sponsoring tonight's year in honor of all three of those families are helping put tonight together, and the individuals who are in charge of allocation, of course, electricity as well as on the book scene, for everybody else who helps out generally, and for your food, what else from afar or from here, let's begin. Let's begin the five priorities of tzedakah. All masters are mentioned, and one of the some of the it says, share only one of the mitzvahs that you're allowed to test Hashem. Of course, tells us, one of those mitzvahs you're allowed to test Hashem. You're supposed to give, thank you. You're supposed to give 1/10 of your annual earnings in order that you become wealthy. You feel that this up there. You feel that you should become kosher. Only time we're allowed to test Hashem, even though, as we said before, again, even though it says in Parashas Hanan, we're not supposed to test Hashem, that applies to all other mitzvahs and commandments, but not to the mitzvah of tzedakah. You're allowed to give tzedakah on condition that you become wealthy. And the Gemara there quotes the pasuk from Malachi, Paragimel, that we're instructed to bring all of the meiser that we have to the storehouse, to Hashem's storehouse. And if we do, Hashem will open the heavens, the Avos Hashemayim B'Tachu, to give us rain and give us a bracha ad v'lidayin, unlimited bracha. So again, we're allowed to do that to test Hashem in order to get more even physical wealth. Tosfos, in the second of the Makoros, continue to enjoy both your Gashmias and Ruchnias. Tosfos in Maseches Tanis, there. Tosfos in Maseches Tanis, on the Testimonials there, Alatar, on the Das. Dibur Maskal Aser quotes the Sifri. The Sifri says that we learn from the revoid of Eskol, from the Pasuk Enoch, that you not only have to give Meiser, you not only have to give 1/10 of your financial earnings from Tuas Zarecha, from the grain and produce, from what you've planted and what you've earned, but you have to give Meiser from any profit off annual income. The difference here, of course, being that you have to keep track of what you're getting annually, as opposed to maybe what you have from a Yerusha, what you have from an inheritance, what you have from gifts, from annual gifts. It's talking and speaking directly, specifically to the annual income that you receive. Of course, people are familiar with this, but people might not be familiar with what the Baalei HaTosfos are coming to explain, in addition to one giving from many gifts that you have, from many monies and funds that you have, but also from an annual income and that obligation. We always need to know what level the obligation is. That obligation, of course, learned from Parshas Re'eh, as we open this year with, is Minat Torah, is Midoraisa. The opening question, so that's obviously the background. The opening question today's year, wherever you're joining us, is what's the order of preference? What's the order of priority? I didn't bring my link to give clipboard. Aruch, certain subchapters in the discussions based in Shulchan Aruch, Yom Deya, Simon Reish Mem Zayin, Reish Mem Ches, that discuss this, as well as the Shach, one of the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, one of the Nosei who points that out, as well as the Aruch HaShulchan, who gives the hierarchy of preference and priorities to all of these types of aniyah. When we're talking about relatives, we're referring to only if relatives are in need. Do we give more money to them? If they're not in need, we don't just give them because they're relatives. The reason why relatives are first is because they are relatives, because there's a certain relationship. They're what we would call a certain kirva. They're related to us, unlike the other members that I quoted as part of this priorities within the stuff. But it's only on a need base. It's only on a need basis. Aniyah Yircha, I wanted to clarify and have the opportunity of clarifying now. Aniyah Yircha, I want to be crystal clear, are poor people in the city. They don't need to literally be in your city. And I want to explain what I mean. This is an important halachic point. When you give tzedakah, it refers to, right, and the priorities are that I associate myself with. The schools, the institutions, the camps, many of the groups that I associate myself with, both locally as well as hashtatically. I've heard a number of gedolim, including my own grand Rebbe, Rabbi Hershel Shefter Shlita, say, and I want to say this so everybody understands this, from one of our gedolei hador, who explains that he has said this on record and on tape. We'll say it on audio and video as well. That when he has certain aniyim to give to, he makes sure that he gives to the schools that are more in line with his hashkafa. Even if they're over the bridge, as he likes to say, even if they're over the bridge, they're on the other side of the George Washington Bridge, whether you live in New York, New Jersey, or you live in London, or you live somewhere in Maryland in the woods. So it makes no difference. But the point being that the idea that you give in terms of priority, should be those that you're hashkafically aligned with. If you have nothing to do with the school, if you have nothing to do with the camp, the fact that it's down your block, the fact that it's within your vicinity, makes no difference. According to, I'm quoting from, of course, from our Rebbe, from my grand Rebbe, Rabbi Hershel Shefter, but as well, that's what the Shulchan Aruch, that's what the Aruch HaShulchan are being mechavi and pointing to. That's what they're literally pointing to when you give tzedakah. There are, of course, 4 categories of how to prioritize. Different tzedakos, the different charities. Then there's the order of the different people, which we discussed. Then there's the order of different needs, which I'll just clarify now, are broken down into food, clothing, Torah, right? Torah institutions, etc. And the 4th, just to be extra comprehensive, is the Rambam in Hilchos Matnos Haniyim explains the Shmona Mahalos tzedakah, level and attributes of how to give tzedakah. When you give, obviously, the highest is to give secretly and to give somebody enough that they have what to stand on their own 2 feet without them knowing about it. We're probably familiar with that. But the Rambam in Hilchos Matnos Haniyim, Zion in particular, and other Torah in general, as well. Of course, the order of the different stories leads us back to positive versus way. Positive that we began with. Positive versus way. This is our very good knowledge. Amazing. Tells us, Aser to Aser. Aser yourself and you depend on your brain, which is something enough. Explain it. What is that exactly? That's obviously much more than that. I'm not talking about I'm talking about obviously there are different brackets, but it's a question whether it's 110, 14, 110. But it's a question whether it's 110 before studying the necessities or 110 REA. We went to the Krakow Cemetery. One of our last stops was the Bach Circus, of course. And Paz, as the other day, which we quoted, now I'm ready for football. I'm ready. Okay, it's the NFL playoffs. I'm not following it all this season, but this much I know. Okay, welcome. We're back to our radio program. We have everybody on the line. Okay. The Taz and Bach. Do I keep both on or one on? The microphone on the wire. I could take one. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, this is fine? Okay. If it falls off, I'll put both on. It's just, so they say that it's just a minhag. The reason we say, if anybody ever asks you, the reason we say bli neder, this is not comfortable and it looks ridiculous. The reason we say bli neder, the reason it was not explained to me as this. Next time, please let me know. There's a machlokes, all good. There's a machlokes whether meiser ksafim is a din to oraisa, not just the idea of giving tzedakah, and not just, right, meaning whether it's a Torah commandment. And for this, we quote another source. The pasuk in Parshas Vayetze, Bereshis, Perek Chavches, pasuk Chavbeis tells us, the chol asher titan li, aser asirenu lach. Aser asirenu lach. I added the shvana because, of course, it's my bar mitzvah parsha. So aser asirenu lach. And the Taz, as we quoted just before, and the Bach say, no, it's just a minhag. The reason we say bli neder when we give tzedakah in shul, when donating to tzedakah, is so that since everything is based off, as we started this year, based off of annual income, if God forbid you have a difficult year financially, if fiscally things are not going well for you, you're not bound in, Ellie. You're not bound, you're not tied down, or you're not bound in to giving the same amount of money every year. I noticed, I mentioned before that you're obviously in a different bracket for tax purposes. You're also in a different bracket, says the Taz and the Bach, when it comes to giving tzedakah. Are we good? When it comes to giving tzedakah. So that's that. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, which I don't know if you have on your Makoros, better yet, so you get to write it down without having to look at something. The Gemara in Sanhedrin on Daf Mem Hey, I'm not sure if it's on the Makoros, I don't believe so. The Gemara in Sanhedrin on Daf Mem Hey explains that on the one hand, you have, meaning there are basically 2 points here. In terms of sensitivities, when you're giving tzedakah, you have to pay attention to 2 things. One is the idea that chayecha, your life, comes before chaye chavercha, but the Gemara in Sanhedrin, thank you, the Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Mem Hey's specific point is that since bodily pain is considered to be greater than personal disgrace, even at the expense of tznius, even at the expense of modesty, if you have 2 aniyim in front of you, you have 2 poor people in front of you, come in front of you, one is hungry for bread and the other is in need of clothing, so you give to the hungry individual first, even at the expense of tznius, even at the expense of modesty, Ethan. The Gemara in Sanhedrin is telling us that you give to the person who's hungry first. We use this rule even at the expense of tznius. If the hungry individual is a man and the individual seeking clothing is a woman, even so. What about if you have 2 orphans? You have Zachariah Yosef. You have 2, and we're welcoming, obviously, members of a lot of families here. So if I call your middle name and your parents recognize you from that, so then, Ashreichem. But if you have 2 Yisomim in front of you, we have Nachum there, we have Zachariah Yosef. In front of you, you have 2 orphans. You have a male orphan and you have a female orphan, you have a yesoma. Both need money to get married. So who does the money go to first? Who are the priorities given to? So we give the yesoma, we give the female orphan first, provided that you only have money for one of them. But if you have money for both, listen carefully, everybody here and everybody watching, if you have money for both, the male orphan, the yasom, takes precedence, and you give the man first because the male is obligated in pru'ervu. The man is obligated in pru'ervu. That's, of course, the Gemara in Yevamos in the 6th parak. Of course, Meir, right? Of course. So the Gemara in Yevamos in the 6th parak tells us in the discussion of pru'ervu that the male is obligated in pru'ervu, so you give him the money first. What about when you have a clash in terms of priorities as Rishol, in terms of cholim, sick people, as well as giving to Talmud Torah? So Talmud Torah takes precedence to cholim. Giving to Torah institutions, giving to Torah establishments takes precedence, and building a shul is more important than just giving tzedakah. To give money to build a shul, to give money to build a beis medrash is more important, or yeshiva in general is more important than just giving tzedakah. There are people who make sure this is a wonderful, meritorious practice. You have to make sure to follow through. But even following through, you should know about living to give. You should know about live to give, that what the priorities are. There are many people who, they say to themselves, there are many families who do this, they have pushkas at home. They have tzedakah boxes at home because they're worried that they're going to forget to give, whether it's daily or weekly, monthly. So it's a wonderful practice that they have to have a very needy tzedakah, a cancer organization, right, a cancer society, or some other machala, some other sickness, or some other, pressing need, where they have the actual tzedakah box in their house. And when it gets filled up, they bring it to that organization or to the representative in their community. And we should understand that when you have 2 tzedakah boxes, because there are many families, Moshe, who have a number of tzedakah pushkas. But what we're learning tonight is that there's a hierarchy of different tzedakos. Even if you have a number of pushkas in your house, even if you have tzedakah boxes in your house, there is a hierarchy, there is a priority of one to the other. The Ran in the Darim on Daf Mem Aleph just says the greatest form of the Hashevoso Lo, the greatest form of, I don't know if it's on there, we'll get to the other Makoros that are on there, don't worry. The greatest form of Hashavas Aveda is saving a life, or even not only literally saving a life, but even improving the condition, Not only tzedakah and refuah, not only making sure that the person gets well, giving medical expenses, paying for certain medical expenses, paying for certain medical bills, but also hashavas aveda, bringing the person back physically, financially, is so much more important than some of the daily tzedakos that we give, which are great. But understanding, as the Rambam says, this is not me saying this, this is the Rambam in Hilchos Matnos Aniyim, saying that the greatest level is, of course, giving secretively, but giving so that a person can stand on his own 2 feet. Of course, just to clarify, because we always aim for clarity, the order of priorities is Talmud Torah is one. The second is poor people who are also sick, right? The ill. The third is building a shul, which many put together with Talmud Torah. And the fourth is regular tzedakah. Not to say that regular tzedakah is nothing, but compared to the other 3, if we want to know priorities, if you're ever in this situation, and I bless us all that we are in this situation where we can give to any plethora of tzedakos organizations, I should give everybody a bracha that nobody needs to receive. But if we need to give, we should live to give, right? We should live to give, and we should know the priorities of tzedakah. The next question in this comprehensive overview of the mitzvah of tzedakah is, what's the shear of tzedakah? What's the proper and appropriate amount? What's the proper and appropriate amount we should be giving? We find many times in shul people give amounts, and it's wonderful that they're giving, right? They're giving for great reasons. There's no ulterior motive. There's nothing, to think beyond what they're giving. But it's important to know what the exact amount of tzedakah we should be giving. And not just when we get an aliyah in shul or when we hear somebody giving, so bavur she, know their tzedakah, ba'ad, whatever, but we should know the exact amount and what is appropriate. The Gemara in Ksubis, in our Chorav Zman Masechta, on Daf Nun Amud Aleph, tells us that one should not give more than a fifth of his earnings, not more than 1/5. And the Gemara there quotes at the top of the Amud, Hamavazves, literally one who will disgrace, but it literally means here one who will dispose of his funds, of his monies. Al Yavazves Yoser Mechomesh, Yoter Mechomesh. He's not allowed to give totally, in his total amount, in its totality, you're not allowed to give more than a fifth. Why? So the Gemara answers, Kedei shelo yitztarech lebrios. We want everybody to be independent. If he's needy to other people, if he needs others, we don't want him to be dependent upon others. Kedei shelo yitztarech lebrios. Comes the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi comments on this Gemara in the Bavli, but the Yerushalmi points out the first year where you're earning a steady income. When I say first year, I refer to earning a steady salary. The first year you give tzedakah, you can actually give a fifth. From then on, you should give a fifth of your remaining profits. This is reminiscent of the way that we started this year, that it's not only from the Otsar Hashem, you're not only giving from the storehouse of Hashem, not only do you have to give Meiser, a tenth of your earnings, from Tuas Zarecha, from anything that you might have in your storehouse, or from anything that grows that year, but from actual tangible money, from green paper. You have to give, or whatever it is in your currency, whatever pounds and loonies and toonies and dollars and cents and 10 shekel coins and 200 shekel bills, whatever it is, you have to give from both your annual earnings as well as once you start making, so in year 2 and year 3 of your remaining profits. Not necessarily, in order to be clear, not necessarily, right, Sammy, not necessarily 1/5 of your total earnings. You have to reevaluate. This is based on the end of that pasuk in Parshas Vayetze, Aser Aserenu Lach, the double mention of 1/10. I will surely give you 1/10. And come Chazal, our rabbis tell us, Aser Aserenu Lach teaches us 1/10 and 1/10. Simple primary and elementary school math will tell us that gets you to 1/20th, which is otherwise known, or I would say it gets you to, 1/10 plus 1/10, which gets you to 20%, which is a fifth. So that's what it means. Hamavazves, if you're going to disgrace and dispose of your money, Hamavazves, al Yavazves, Yoser Mechomesh. Comes the Mishnah in Peah that we're all familiar with because hopefully we say it every morning in davening. The Mishnah in Peah, the first Mishnah, we should be zocheh to know Mishnayos Bal Peh, not only of the first parak, not only, right, that Elu Dvarim She'ein Bahem Shir, but also of the second parak, the Elu Mafsikin L'Peah, Hanachol V'Ashlulis, Derech HaYachid, Derech HaRabim. I'm sure that all of you are holding a Mishnayos in Peah Bal Peh, but the Mishnah in Peah, Parak Aleph, Mishnah Aleph, tells us certain things do not have a shear. There is no specified amount to certain things, certain devarim, for lack of a better term, certain things that are mentioned in the Mishnah. The Rambam in Hilchos Matnos Aniyim, we're hitting everything on all cylinders. All of the fundamental Makoros, the Gemara, the Rambam, the Yerushalmi, Sukkim and Chumash, of course, even Nach for tonight. So this is Yeshivat Hakotel when you add Nach. And you know this is the comprehensive overview, and Nach is not the first, second, or third makor. But anyway, so I'm just making fun of myself. So the Rambam in Hilchos Matnos Aniyim in Perek Zayin, in Perek Zayin, teaches us that specifically Gemilus Chasadim, not having a shear, not having an amount, right? When you extend yourself in the realm of kindness, right? When you perform acts of chesed, it's interesting because it means to say the fact that it doesn't have an amount to give is interesting because it means that even though you've already helped someone with their money, you still have to perform the acts of kindness, thereby separating, says the Rambam in his interpretation of the Mishnah in Peah, thereby separating actual monies that you give, Sammy, actual money, Sammy times two, but actual money that you give and your chesed. But they're mentioned in the same Mishnah. They're mentioned in the same Mishnah as Elu Dvarim She'ein Lohem Shir. HaPeah, we know that the entire Maseches Peah, we're not doing a discussion and a recap of all of Maseches Peah in 45 minutes. That's already online, so just click on my name and listen on the YU website. But when you discuss Maseches Peah, it's all about matnos aniyim, gifts you're giving to the poor. And the Rambam's interpretation of that Mishnah in Peah, Aryeh, is it's not just the money that you give. It's not just the funds that you give. It's chesed is also. Gemilas chasadim is included there too. So if Gemilas chasadim is included there too, there's no specific amount to extending yourself after you give specific money. Whatever funds you give, you still have to fulfill the rest of that Mishnah. There's still the obligation of Gemilas Chasadim as much as you can extend yourself. The Bavli and Yerushalmi have a machlokes. They have a dispute as to how to understand the Bavli's statement of Hamevazvez al Yevazvez Yoser Mechomesh. That when you're going to expend and extend and dispose of your monies, right? Extend and expend yourself, you may not give more than a fifth. The Bavli understands as follows. The term al yevazvez, not to give too much, is a takana. It's a decree, it's an enactment. It's really usser. The takana came to say it is a prohibition. It's forbidden to spend more than a fifth on tzedakah. The Yerushalmi disagrees. The Yerushalmi says, if you look at the statement in the Bavli, Eitan Yehuda, if you look at the statement in the Bavli, Matul, if you look at the statement in the Bavli, you'll see that it's written in what we would call Lashon Chiyuv. I always like translating. It's written in a compulsory, obligatory language. You have to give, right? You have to give up to that amount. You're not supposed to dispense all of your money, or you're not supposed to expend too much of your money and give away too many of your funds. But the Yerushalmi says it's written in a language of obligation that one must give at least a fifth to tzedakah. This clearly implies, says the Yerushalmi, that more than a fifth is not an obligation, but get this, it's also not a prohibition. It's certainly not usser. It's certainly not prohibited. By giving more, according to this, it's considered what we would categorize as a midas chasidus, a meritorious practice, something that the pious people do, a midas chasidus, something that if you want to, you may. That's the machlokes, that's the dispute between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi into how to understand hamevazvez al yevazvez yoser mechomesh. You're supposed to give a certain amount of money. We've discussed the priorities at length. Now we're discussing the sheer, the amount at length, but to understand what's the limit and then what's the machlokes within the limit. There's also another Rambam, because before we quote the Rambam in the Yad HaChazaka, which is not the first one that we're quoting tonight, the Rambam in his Perush HaMishnayos, in Maseches Peah, to understand this Mishnah, disagrees. The Rambam says there's an absolute obligation to give a fifth, and it's not just to give 20%, and it's not just a nice thing to do. But there's a third Rambam, not in the Perush of Mishnayos, but in the Yad HaChazaka. The Rambam in Hilchos Erechin v'Charamin, maybe an area that we haven't learned in depth yet. The Rambam in Hilchos Erechin v'Charamin, Perek Ches, Halacha Yud Gimel, which I think you do have on the Makoros in front of you. Yes, you have that Rambam in Perush of Mishnayos, as well as the Rambam in Erechin v'Charamin. So the Rambam explains in Hilchos Erechin that one is never allowed to consecrate to Hektish all of his belongings. And if he does so, he violates the statement of giving Mikol Asher Lo, but not Kol Asher Lo. He should give from all of what he has and not give literally all of what he has. What is that based on? I say that every good, opinion always needs a makor. You need a source for everything. Those who are learning with us for the first time, those who have heard many shiurim from me in the past, I have said this many times. Everything needs to be backed up by a makor. Even a chiddush and even a statement, if it's somewhere in Chazal, it needs to be backed up by a makor. The Rambam source is the Gemara in Erechin, Arachin, Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph. I always repeat, those of you who have heard me quote various Gemaras in Erechin in my various shiurim, I always repeat Arachin after Erechin because I don't want people getting confused, and I want people who might not even be exposed at all to that Masechta sitting lonely in Seder Kachim to be familiar with that exposure. That's a word that many of you have heard from me, whether explicitly or through my shiurim. I want people to be exposed to as many Makoros as possible. So the Rambam bases his opinion on the Gemara in Erechin. The Rambam quotes the Gemara in Erechin, Arachin Daf Chav Ches, where he explains that the Gemara says that to do so is absolute nonsense. To violate kol and mikol, to give away everything, bakol, mikol, kol. So to give away everything as opposed to mikol, from everything, is absolute nonsense. Not only absolute nonsense that you're giving away all your money, but you will be yitzarech lebrios. It's not something that's forbidden, but it's forbidden for good reason. And really, these two statements from the Rambam hint to two different categories and definitions of giving tzedakah. The first category and definition is tzedakah for a mitzvah. What we described before, this should be familiar to us for the first half of this year, of giving for a shul, giving for the purposes of Talmud Torah. But then there's the second category, if you're taking notes here or at home, the second category is what we would call regular mainstream tzedakah. Regular financial needs, giving tzedakah to aniyim. Just, having a pushka in your house, having a tzedakah box in your house, and giving that. We might not understand when I mentioned before the amount from Nach that we quoted the pasuk of a shlishis hashekel is, and what that corresponds to, but the Gemara in Bava Basra on Daf Tes Amud Aleph, which you should have, yes, we do have on the Makoros, explains that you have to give at least a shlishis hashekel each year, learned from the pasuk in Nach, from the pasuk in Nehemiah in Perek Yud. V'hamidenu aleinu mitzvah laseis aleinu shlishis hashekel. For the purpose of what, Raf? For the purpose of giving to Beis Elokeinu. All of it goes to the upkeep, the Beta Kabayis. Those of you who have learned as part of the Kiyas Incentive Program, Ches Megillah. So you're probably, because we finished last week and we're in intensive Chazara now, aren't we? So the Gemara in the fourth parak of Megillah quotes the Mishnayos and Shkalim and say, well, where does that money go to? The Echad Ba'adar Mashmiyan al Shkalim, which will whip around and be here faster than we know it. So where does that money go to? That money goes to the Beta Kabayis, to the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash, of the Mishkan or of the Beis HaMikdash. And that's what the Gemara in Bava Basra is explaining based on the pasuk. You give that amount and it goes to Beis Elokeinu, which makes us understand and clarifies for us that the categories of tzedakah are not just giving to people in need because they're cholim, not just giving to the local pantry, but giving to things that are associated with Beis Elokeinu, things that are associated with a shul, a Beis Medrash, upkeep of a shul, even if it's upkeep of the boiler system. It makes no difference. That's all considered to be part of the heating bill, part of the air conditioning bill, whatever it is, even if it's not part of the actual learning, it's all part of the actual Talmud Torah. And that's something to understand when you're giving tzedakah. It doesn't just fall into one category, Ezra. It falls into a number of different categories. What are the guidelines for giving tzedakah and meiser? Our third question of this year. We've had the order of priorities of giving tzedakah. We've had the amount of giving tzedakah. Now we're up to the guidelines for giving tzedakah and meiser. This you also don't have on your Makoros, but listen carefully. The Chafetz Chaim, in one of his seminal works, the Sefer Avas Chesed, a sefer that we're not familiar with. We're familiar with the Mishnah Berurah. We're familiar with the Shmiras HaLashon. I don't know how familiar we are with the Sefer Shmiras HaLashon, but we're familiar with the Shmiras HaLashon. We might be familiar with the Sefer Avas Chesed. The Chafetz Chaim in the Sefer Avas Chesed, which goes through a broad range of different points of ethical refinement. In Perek Yurches, we have Perek Yurches, Perek Yutes. So the Chafetz Chaim in his Sefer Avas Chesed says, and this is something that's very important to us, very practical, because this goes on in all schools across the globe, and we need to understand what is going on behind the statement. We should be saying when we give tzedakah, when we know their tzedakah, ba'ad haskaras nishmasam, or whether we're giving in memory of a loved one, or for any other purpose, in honor of a simcha, we should say the words bli neder. We should say the words bli neder so as not to deal with the problem of eventually not being able to give. I mentioned this before, when maybe our fiscal outcome, income, and results can be different from year to year. We have to make sure that we chart it, we have to make sure that we chart it annually and understand that we're giving on an annual basis. Not only on an annual basis, but God forbid a million times over, if things take a turn for the worse financially, we don't lock ourselves into a neder. We don't lock ourselves into a neder that might require hataras nedarim, that's for another shir, but that would require getting in front of a bezdin of 3 people and annulling that vow. We should always be saying bli neder when we pledge to give tzedakah. The second point that the Chafetz Chaim makes in his Sefer Avas Chesed is you have to do a cheshbon. You have to take an account of your income either every half a year or every year, or once a year every year. And the third point the Chafetz Chaim makes in Avas Chesed is that if you find that you gave more than meiser, you can use the excess for the following year. You can use the excess for the following year, because not everyone agrees to this. Because not everybody agrees to this position, it's best to make it t'nai. We make a condition. We give on condition at the beginning of the year, before receiving your first paycheck, even if you don't have a steady income. What I meant before steady income is I meant people who are giving, a substantial amount from their annual stable income. But if we're at the age of Shana Aleph or Shana Bet, and the only money we're earning is because we're a counselor in camp, we're earning money only in the summer, we're earning money for odd jobs, right, done. So you also need to give meiser from that as well. But I'm talking about from the year to year. Usually those people don't have the problem of bli neder, because they work on when you're 17 or 18 years old, or even slightly younger, when you get your first job in camp, you don't have a regular steady income. It's important to realize this halachically. You do need to give meiser from that money, but you're not subject to the bli neder that people are making in shul when they get aliyahs. Those are for people who are making, you can say it has very little ramification if you don't have an annual steady income, but it's important to know there's a difference. There is a distinction between those two types of income. Okay. Even within Meiser, even within giving a tenth of your income, there are three approaches. The Chasam Sofer that we have on the Makoros in Yoredeya, Siman Reish Chavtes, tells us that really min HaTorah, from a Torah standpoint, you have to spend all of your money. And the Chachamim came before everybody just, breathed a sigh of relief. And the Chachamim came and said, you only need to spend 1/5. It was exactly that. It was an enactment from our rabbis. That comes from the Chachamim. The second approach is the Netziv. The Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, tells us the root of this enactment, the root of this decree of not giving more than 1/5, is so you won't eventually become a poor person yourself. Essentially paraphrasing the Gemara in Ksubos on Daf Nun, the Gemara in Maseches Ksubos on Daf Nun, that explains, again, we'll say it for a third or fourth time, HaMevazvez al Yevazvez Yoser Mechomesh. When you extend and expend yourself and from your money, don't give more than 1/5. And the third is the Yerushalmi in Peah. We quoted a different Yerushalmi, but the Yerushalmi in Peah tells us that it goes all the way back to Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. Those who have joined us, I know a bunch of people, and I know I'm speaking to people beyond this table who have joined us online and have requested for the history and concept of Torah Sheba'al Peh Shiur, the 5,000 years of Torah history, this room who come to it live every week. But the Yerushalmi in Peah tells us it's based on a concept, one of the 7 major concepts of Torah Sheba'al Peh, and that is this idea of giving and expending, right? Of giving from your own, extending yourself, is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. You won't find it in the Torah anywhere. That's the concept of the halacha l'Moshe Sinai, as Evan knows very well, right? You won't find it anywhere in the Torah, but we know that it's true simply because Hashem told Moshe. Nowhere in the Torah does it say tefillin have to be black. Nowhere in the Torah does it say that the ritzuos have to be black. Nowhere in the Torah does it mention the shin on the tefillin shel rosh. We know it simply because we have a tradition. We have Masorah. It adds to our emunah, and emunah of our Masorah, right? It adds to our belief simply because Hashem told Moshe. So that's what the Yerushalmi says. It's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that they forgot and reinstituted. And to give another shout out to the Bekias Incentive Program, on the bottom of Daf Beis and Beis and Daf Gimel and Aleph of Maseches Megillah, Shachachum v'chazru v'yastum. Are there any isurim? Are there any prohibitions, as we conclude this year, involved in giving tzedakah? Shana on Daf Dalid Amud Aleph, and it extends for more than an amud, for at least a couple of blot, discusses the isser, the prohibition of bal ta'acher. We always like explaining things both in Hebrew and in English. Delaying payment. Bal ta'acher, from the word le'acher, to delay. You're not allowed to delay paying tzedakah that you were noder, that you pledged to give to the shul or the tzibur, to give to the shul or to the community. Rabbeinu Tam, in Rosh Hashanah, on Daf Daled Amud Aleph, quoted in Tosfos, Rabbeinu Tam explains, but tzedakah that you pledged to give on your own does not carry with it a prohibition of bal ta'acher. There's no prohibition of delaying. It's that you're ki'ilu, it's as if, what we would call in English, you're on the honor system. In other words, I gave the example before a couple of times. I'll give the example one more time. If you have a tzedakah box, if you have a pushka in your house designated to a specific tzedakah organization, that's on your own honor system of when to give it to them. Frame to giving to that tzedakah. What is the nature of the Isser of Baal Ta'acher? We'll do a little bit of lumdus, a little bit of analytical learning for those who are joining us here in Yerushalayim HaKodesh, as well as those who are following online. What is the nature of the prohibition of delaying payment of tzedakah? Do you look at it as it's a lack or a shortcoming in the actual pledge that you made? That's one side. Or do you look at it as the neder is still fulfilled? The vow that you made, the pledge that you made to give is still fulfilled, but there's a separate prohibition when you delay payment. There's a separate isser. There's a separate prohibition of delaying payment. As Rav Soloveitchik, my great-grand Rebbe, liked to say, a chakira without an afkamina is just plain philosophy. So we will give an afkamina so that everybody gets their money's worth. The nafkamina here, what's the difference between the two sides of this chakira, between looking at it as either that it's a lack or a shortcoming in the actual pledge, or that the pledge is still intact, but there's a separate prohibition when you delay the payment of Baal Ta'acher, Rosh Hashanah Daf Daled. The nafkamina is when you say, I'll give when I want. Etein kishe'ertze. I'll give whenever I want. It's considered as if there's no pledge made at all. And if, right, it's considered as if the pledge is not binding at all. Ratzon, the fact that you said, I'm going to give whenever I want, Gidon, is making the neder, making the pledge null and void. And finally, for the grand finale, because believe it or not, it's crazy. We have another few weeks, but we're almost at Shloshim Yom Kodem L'Chag. You all know what Chag I'm talking about. So the specific mitzvah that has roots and fundamentals in tzedakah is, of course, the mitzvah of Matanos LaEvyonim. For the third time, and I didn't plan this, for so-and-so B'kiyas Incentive Program, the Gemara in Megillah at the bottom of Zayin Amud Aleph, spilling over to Zayin Amud Beis, to the top of Zayin Amud Beis also. Zayin Amud Beis is well known for an entirely different thing, but the top of Zayin Amud Beis, Rashi in Megillah, commenting on Matanos LaEvyonim, says the reason that it's written in plural is to teach you the mitzvah is to give two poor people two gifts. Two gifts to two poor people. The Rambam in Hilchos Megillah, of course, we're fond of quoting Rambams. The Rambam, which you have in your Mekoros in Hilchos Megillah, Perek Beis Halacha Tez Zayin, agrees. And he says, it does not need to be food. I want to repeat that so that everybody understands what I'm saying. It does not need to be food. It can be money, it can be funds, it can even be a donation in Israel bonds. It can be a donation that's given to plant a tree in Sderot or what have you. On the next real upcoming Yom Tif, right? On the 30 days before, on the Shloshim Yom Kodem L'Chag. So we say that we accept, just like they say that they accept all checks and it's tax deductible and blah blah blah. We accept clothing, we accept food, etc. We do not recite a bracha on the mitzvah of tzedakah. On the mitzvah of tzedakah, on the mitzvah of Matanos LaEvyonim Meir, we do not recite a bracha, and the question is why. And there are a couple of answers to this question, and with this we close. One reason is because just like with, it's a whole question, but just like with Matanos LaEvyonim's cousin or brother, Mishloach Manos, we're worried that we're worried that the recipient might not accept. And there's a whole question in lumdus, in analytical Talmudic learning, whether you're yotze, whether you fulfill your obligation of Mishloach Manos. I would say the same thing somewhat related, not officially related, but somewhat related to Matanos Lavyonim and Tzedakah, we're worried the recipient might not accept. For whatever reason, we don't make a bracha on mitzvos where we're worried that the person might not accept. It might not go through. The Pri Megadim points out from this, the Pri Megadim, one of the halachic commentators from a couple of hundred years ago, from a few hundred years ago, in Orach Chaim, Siman Tov Reis Tzadi Beis, points out that you see that the mitzvah of charity, the mitzvah of tzedakah, we've been talking about tonight, is on the recipient. As we're concerned for a bracha l'vatala, we're concerned for a worthless bracha, for a bracha that's going to be null and void, it's going to go to nothing. So we don't make a bracha for worried that the recipient might not accept. And the Magen Avram points out in Orach Chaim, Siman Tov Reis Tzadi Beis, there in the halachos and the discussion of Matanos Le'Evyonim, says no bracha is recited on Matanos Le'Evyonim for that matter, as well as the general mitzvah of tzedakah and all of its subcategories that we spoke about tonight at length, because giving gifts, hopefully, is a routine activity. And we don't recite brachos on routine activities, question of how to understand that. But this moves the mitzvah away from pure tzedakah, from pure charitable giving, right? Because it's routine. And the Sridei Eish adds another reason we don't say a bracha on mitzvos that are ben adam lachaveiro, ben adam lachaveiro oriented, that are ben adam lachaveiro, if they really heavily depend on the other person. Very similar reason to the first one we gave, but slightly different, that he groups this in the general discussion of mitzvos that are ben adam lachaveiro. I think we all, and I hope we all got, most importantly, a clear, and together with that, a comprehensive overview of the mitzvah of tzedakah. I'm sure the same style if you're used to from the same person, if you're used to hearing from me and we're learning together, we should all live to give and now understand the entire mitzvah, priorities, amounts, the nature, and everything else involved, the isurim, the guidelines, and the prohibitions involved in the mitzvah of tzedakah. We should be zocheh to have enough money to give tzedakah. We should also be zocheh that nobody should need our tzedakah. Have a great day and a great night.